Now, Donald Coulter is an award-winning journalist. He's an American here in Moscow. That gives him a unique perspective, well, almost unique. There are a few other Americans here, but none so well embedded in the media scene and knowing quite as much as Donald Coulter, who joins me now. Donald, thanks for coming back. I want to talk to you about Russia, of course, but I want to talk to you as an American, first of all. I mean, I'm half of the time quite happy with what Donald Trump is saying, and half of the time scared out of my wits by what he's saying, and all of the time completely bemused at the volatility, the incredible unpredictability of this man. He has, in the last couple of hours, gone from threatening to send Elon Musk back to Africa, cancel his security pass, accusing him of being on ketamine and all kinds of illegal drugs. And just in the last couple of hours, they're kissing and making up.
Right.
Now, if you know, a local fight in a bar can end that way, but when your finger's on the nuclear trigger, that kind of zany unpredictability is quite frightening, is it not?
It is, but first of all, George, I want to say thanks for inviting me on the show. I mean, we've done this through a screen so many times, and it's a real pleasure to have this
so much better
done in person for the first time. But in terms of Trump, yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you. I think it's part of his personality to be completely unpredictable, and I also think part of it is part of his political strategy. You know, obviously I work at RT, and a lot of us were discussing this falling apart of the bromance between Elon Musk and Donald Trump over the last week. And you know, a lot of people think that it was a political stunt that was planned, actually, between Elon Musk and Donald Trump, that it wasn't really something that was genuine. A lot of people were actually forecasting the sort of mending of this spat between Elon Musk and Donald Trump.
It's hard to see the upside of it, though.
It is, because I also thought, I didn't think it was something planned, because I mean, of course, we saw Elon Musk saying that Trump was in the Epstein files, and Trump saying that he's not going to give subsidies to the electric cars Elon's putting out. I mean, Elon Musk lost, in terms of stock value, billions of dollars just because of this spat. You know, sometimes I watch CNN just to understand what the liberal media is saying about this kind of stuff, and they brought up a good point.
You do it so we don't have to.
Exactly. But they brought up one good point, that as a result of this spat on Twitter, the amount of money that, or the amount of stock value that Elon Musk lost as a result of it, was so many billions of dollars, the quantity of which only like 14 people in history have ever made in their entire lives. So this obviously did have somewhat of an effect, but again, it's stock prices, and it could be part of a longer strategy. I don't know what the end game could be.
No, that's why we're not stockbrokers.
Yeah, exactly.
But to pursue the point, Donald Trump says he did not know that the Ukraine was going to blow up that railway bridge. He did not know that the Ukraine was going to make a drone attack on strategic bombers that were out in the open as part of the START treaty. They were required to be out in the open so the other side can see from aerial surveillance how many bombers there are and where they are. A serious act of terrorism by any metric. Donald Trump says he did not know about them, but American operatives were undoubtedly involved in them. So the question is, who's running the United States? Plainly, the president, the commander-in-chief, if he did not know of this operation, is being deceived by his subordinates.
Well, I think that has to do with the division between, the elected officials and what people usually call the deep state, right? We've got a whole military bureaucracy that's actually helping Ukraine wage its terroristic war, and the elected officials of the Trump administration aren't micromanaging that. So, and I really do think that Trump wasn't aware of it, because, of course, we started really seeing just how little Trump knows about what's actually going on the ground at the beginning of this revival of the Istanbul peace talks, right? Because basically at the beginning of this second round of peace talks in Istanbul between Russia and Ukraine, we saw Ukraine try to sabotage them immediately, essentially. They have significantly increased their drone attacks on civilian infrastructure in Russian territory. So much so, I mean, obviously Russian air defenses shoot pretty much all of them out of the sky, but I mean, you know, I live in Moscow. I was in the suburbs just several weeks ago, and I heard the anti-air guns going off. That's a reality for people who are living in the suburbs of Moscow and even around some of the airports sometimes. And then, as a result, in response to this, obviously Russia launched military strikes on military infrastructure in Ukraine as an answer to this provocation. And Trump said that because Russia did that, he thought Putin was going crazy. Obviously, he doesn't know all the facts, and this is something that even Vladimir Putin's aides had said, specifically Yuri Ushakov, one of his top aides. He said it looks like Trump doesn't know all the facts if he's thinking that Putin's going crazy over this. But we've been seeing a back and forth throughout these Istanbul peace talks that was started by Ukraine. But you know, Russia also launched a series of strikes recently that Trump commented on, and he said that basically that Ukraine deserved it.
They had it coming. Yeah.
So maybe he's starting to put some of the pieces together at this point.
It's this wild oscillation. You know, one minute he's humiliating Zelensky in the White House, telling him he has no cards. 1 minute he's cutting off military aid and intelligence cooperation. And the next minute he's saying, he said it just the other day to Merz, we're good with Ukraine. We've got the rare earths and so on. It's difficult to know where US policy is going. It's not that difficult to know where Russian policy is going, is it? Russia is taking the gloves off, don't you think?
I think so, and I think it's, in terms of Russian policy, you bring up a good point. You know, a lot of people that were in political life in the United States and Russia throughout the Cold War understand that Russian politicians, Soviet politicians look at politics and diplomacy as more of a chess game, right? And American politicians tend to look at it in less of a logical way.
Ten-pin bowling.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Less of a logical way and more of a way of how we're going to backstab these guys to get what we want, essentially. And, you know, Trump's administration doesn't seem to be entirely an exception to this, but he seems to be using, in a lot of ways, the unpredictability of his personality. I mean, we've seen that now Trump has come to some sort of agreement with China. At least he's said it officially. We haven't heard any comment from the Chinese side yet.
It might not be true.
Yeah, maybe it's just something he's made up in his own head. But if that's the case, you know, all these weeks of 140% tariffs, 200% tariffs. I mean, you could understand that as a sort of bargaining tactic to try and immediately light a flame under the butt of the Chinese to try and end with a more beneficial rate of tariffs for the United States. I mean, but in terms of the Ukraine conflict, I mean, I really think Trump got into something that he didn't really understand how he was going to be able to handle it. He said he thought he was going to come in and, it's just a war, you know, I'm going to come in and be able to settle this thing, no problem. He didn't understand how seriously, you know, at odds Ukraine and Russia are, how at odds both of their interests are, because Russia has no reason to give up on its goals in the military operation that it set from the start: the neutralization of Ukraine, denazification of the country, and integration of these territories, former Ukrainian territories that had voted to become part of Russia. Ukraine is not going to give up on that. It's made clear. I mean, they still want to keep Crimea, for God's sake. And we've seen attempts by, you know, by the Trump administration to try and have Russia only keep the parts of these territories that are militarily occupied for now by the Russian forces and settle for that. That's not going to happen. You know, Russia doesn't want to keep a sort of Korean War situation for the next 100 years. They need to denazify Ukraine because they see how volatile it can be to have a state like that on its border.
Many Russians say to me here, in fact, that this has to be done now so that our children or grandchildren don't have to do it again.
Absolutely.
That this has to be resolved. These matters have to be settled.
How many countries hostile to Russia are there on the Russian border? There's Poland, a NATO state, Latvia, NATO state, Estonia, NATO state, Lithuania, now we got Finland, Sweden. I mean, where does it end, right? That's Russia wants it to end in Ukraine.
Tulsi Gabbard, I think, a kind of ray of light in the, or at least intelligence, no pun intended, in the White House, Director of National Intelligence. She was at Hiroshima today. And she spoke what were previously commonplaces, but have remarkably gone out of fashion. She spoke of the sheer horror, the existential horror of nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
And yet we have prime ministers, presidents, behaving in such a cavalier way in this conflict, apparently oblivious or careless of what the consequences of what they're demanding and what they're doing could be. I find it quite remarkable. Once upon a time, 1 million people would be out on the march in London, and every one of them would know that there's no hiding place from nuclear war.
Yeah.
Whatever they tell you about going under the stairs or under a table, you're all going to die. And yet we've got ministers, prime ministers, presidents, cavalierly careering down the path which might lead there, and they're apparently given a free ride by the media and by the rest of the public, most of the public. It's chilling, isn't it?
It's, I would say, the behavior we've seen from Western politicians in that regard is psychotic. I mean, how far are they going to be willing to go to see where that actual red line is? I mean, once they cross it, there's no point of return. I mean, it started with just giving Ukraine weapons, and then military advisors, sharing military intelligence, helping them with satellites. Now, I mean, we've got, there were even talk of sending the regular military from European Union countries there. Now we've got the French government saying that the Renault car manufacturer is going to start manufacturing drones for the Ukrainian military on Ukrainian territory. And we've got, who knows if they're going to be working with some of these so-called civilians now that are being told by the Ukrainian government to produce drones for the war effort as well. I mean, those are, these domestic sort of drone production facilities are going to be legitimately considered military targets according to international law in that regard. I mean, where the red line is, I mean, they keep pushing and pushing, and like I said, the red line for launching nuclear weapons is not one that we can come back from.
No, it's called a red line for a reason.
Exactly.
Now they want, you alluded to it, they want a ceasefire, and ultimately they want to freeze the line of contact where it is.
Yeah.
Although be careful what you wish for, because that line of contact is rapidly changing,
right,
more rapidly than at any time in the conflict. Russia is gaining more and more territory. The city of Sumy might well fall very soon. But that's what they're after. And they often refer to Korea. They want to freeze the conflict on a parallel line and keep it that way with two armed camps on either side of that parallel line. You've just recently been to Korea.
Right.
How's that working out, Korea?
Well, I was in North Korea, as you probably
There's only
know.
one Korea.
There's only one Korea, yeah. But this is the third time I've been to Korea. This time I wasn't there for that long. I was traveling with the presidential pool of journalists, this time with Sergei Shoigu, because he's now the secretary of Russia's Security Council. And, the correspondence they have with Kim Jong-un, it's not done over the telephone. He makes a visit there, hands him written correspondence, and that's how this is done. But, I mean, it's on the backdrop of rapidly developing relations between Russia and the DPRK. They were always quite good, but they're really becoming close now. First time I was there was during the signing of the Comprehensive Strategic Partnership Agreement between Russia and the DPRK, which allowed, according to international law, because of this document, for DPRK troops to participate in the military operation, which we saw in the liberation of the Kursk region from Ukrainian occupation there. So, you know, based on the development of relations between these two countries, it really is something remarkable. Even in the tourist sector, right? The borders for the DPRK are completely closed to pretty much all tourists all over the world, except for Russian ones. And this,
in fact, they're building like holiday camps and hotels for Russian tourists.
They've built an entire huge tourist complex city that they're going to open up soon. And I'm guessing the reason they came up with that is because obviously any foreigner who travels to North Korea, you got to travel with minders that the government gives you. And honestly, it's not like they're spying on you. I mean, I'm talking as a journalist. They're actually very helpful. They never asked to see what I was filming or how I was making my journalistic content or anything. They're just there and they're like, tell us what you want to see, we'll make it happen. And so, you know, I don't really like this word minders that the Western propaganda has come up with. They're kind of just like guides, really. And yeah, like I said, this huge complex is going to be open soon, and I'm guessing it's going to be so that, you know, tourists can go there and enjoy all of the touristic aspects of the DPRK without having to have guides with them or whatever. So it's definitely...
Meanwhile, much to the chagrin of Steve Bannon and co., South Korea has elected a new president who seems to be, well, a little bit different, at least, to his predecessor.
It seems like one of the best, actually, presidents we've seen in South Korea for a while, because the predecessor, I mean, seemed to me, based on what I was reading in the news, as like some Cold War hardliner that... I mean, why was he impeached in the first place? Because he declared martial law without really any sort of
he invaded the parliament.
Invaded the parliament on the basis, according to him, of a potential pro-DPRK uprising in South Korea. That's absurd. And obviously the South Korean people thought so too, because they've elected a new president who now has a more soft attitude towards the DPRK. They want to actually have relations, work things out. Just recently, his administration decided to turn off all of these propaganda loudspeakers on the border with the DPRK that for God knows how long have been broadcasting. They've been broadcasting not only like some news or propaganda or whatever, K-pop across the border. And you know, that always cracks me up, because K-pop in North Korea is considered so weird. I don't know if you remember, but when the Trump detente in North Korea was happening and there was a little bit of cultural exchange between North Korea and South Korea, South Korean K-pop groups had gone to North Korea to have a concert, and if anyone's watching, look this up on YouTube, you'll find it hilarious. There's footage of these K-pop groups like shaking their butts in front of North Korean auditoriums, and then the camera goes to the North Koreans and they're just watching, they're like, what is this? Like the looks on their faces.
My feelings about K-pop entirely summed up in that. Now, on that subject, you're an American, you're a young one, but you must be aware that a great American died today, Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys, 82. He had a decent innings considering all the drugs he took. He was a musical genius of a kind that I'm not sure America has ever produced before or since. So maybe a word or two from you about the passing of an American icon.
Well, of course, his music was from a different generation than mine, but you know, music like that is really important to everyone, because music plays the role of soft power in a lot of places, you know. K-pop, for example, we were just talking about, didn't play a very positive role in the North, didn't really work, but you know, the music that people make and the sort of ideology that's behind it, the ideas that the creators bring with them in their songs and their words, it's much more important than just what we listen to, the individual experience we come from it. It defines generations.
Pet Sounds, in my view, the greatest album ever made, even better than Sgt. Pepper's. Now I've set a hair running. Donald Courter, thanks as always for joining us
Always a pleasure.
on the mother of all talk shows.